Welcome to the Transform Your Workplace podcast. I'm Brandon Laws, and I've got Paige Tamlyn with me here live in person.
Live, here I am.
It's good to have you.
It's good to be back.
We always end up talking about generational stuff. This is great.
I feel like this is like my interest level.
Yeah. I mean, I have an interest in this because it's not sticking for people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's constant conversation. I hear it all the time at clients. I hear it with my friends, with my family. Everybody talks about it.
Yeah.
So.
And so today what we wanted to talk about, you brought this article to me from SHRM. It's called, the titles, Okay Boomer and Lazy Millennial Shouldn't Be Ignored. And this is by Christina Rivalis. Sorry to
pronunciation.
Sorry, Christina. This is from a SHRM article, February 11th, 2020. So this is fresh.
Recent.
It's recent. Okay, so I've never used this term, okay boomer.
Okay, boomer.
Okay, boomer. Have you used that before?
I have used that.
Oh, you have. In what context though?
I would never use it at work.
Okay.
So I'll put that out there. So my parents are of the boomer generation, and they often will come to me and say like, "Oh, let's have the millennial help us like set up our tech or whatever it is that I've
set up your iPhone.
Exactly.
Move
it's
things
like,
to the cloud."
I joke with them anytime I buy them something that it comes with an hour of tech support. Like that's my limit with them. And so they'll say something like that. I'm just like, okay, boomer. And like, they don't really know the reference point, right? That it's like in social media, there's like audio tracks with the okay boomer. And
I need to get.
It's on TikTok.
It's on TikTok. Yeah,
I will send it to you the next time I see one.
Okay.
But yeah, there's like an okay boomer soundtrack. And it's just millennials or the next generation talking about their interactions with the boomer generation.
Yeah. So you're saying the okay boomer and you say it at home. You don't say it at work.
Mm-hmm.
I recommend not saying it at work. And for listeners, do not use this.
Do not.
Work. And similar, it goes to the lazy millennial term. Like I'm so tired of that.
It's
right, because it's not
so
true.
Bad.
I mean, like
all the time,
just because,
or just we're entitled, or we're whatever the stereotype is. And I get that every generation has a stereotype, but I feel like the millennial one is really bad.
Yeah, I think the stereotypes are easy because like you can describe an entire generation, and that's why people use it. But it's not fair. Because you have a boomer walking in or you have a millennial walking in, and to put a label on somebody without even knowing them.
And not a lot of people. And we have a couple coworkers who feel very strongly about not identifying with the millennial generation. Yeah. So I think if you're labeling everybody, we know what the problem is with labeling is you're not capturing everybody. But I think there are certain characteristics of each generation that you could say, in general, this generation, values this or,
Yeah, and that's so I read a book a while ago, it was probably a few years ago. I think it was called Generations at Work. And they did a good job of really describing each of the generations in terms of like what happened during the era, what their values are, how they were brought up, and like they just describe what kind of happened. But this is of course, just in general, like not everybody has the same experience or grew up valuing the same thing. So this is a good way to describe an entire generation, but how do you can't describe their behavior because you don't know them and their tendencies and their upbringing and all that. So I think people use these terms because they're easy.
Well, and it's meant to have like a comedic relief, right? Sure. Like you're frustrated about something, so it's like, this millennial, or a boomer can't, do whatever. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of generalization that can be really hurtful. And what the article was talking about was that people who are using this in the workplace, even if they're trying to be funny, you shouldn't be ignoring that. And what I've seen is there are some complaints that are coming around of microaggressions in the workplace and what that is like. So somebody who is constantly using that as a tool, as a way to generalize people could be considered a microaggression. Yeah. So if you are somebody in your workforce who has complaints reported to, or you're in a leadership position or whoever, these are things that you shouldn't ignore was the whole point of the article, which I thought was really interesting that we're getting to that point where people are so offended by these two very general terms at first because people are using them in a hurtful way.
Yeah, they are. And the article definitely points out that we perpetuate the stereotypes by using these kind of words, and it's harmful to people. Like, I don't like to be termed, like I'm on the upper end of a millennial. You're more right in the middle of it.
I am right smack in the middle. Yeah, but there's a lot of things I don't identify with being a millennial. I don't job hop. I don't, there's a lot of things that I don't. And that can be really hurtful for somebody, especially people who don't know you very well, would just overgeneralize your,
So the article, there's a quote that I pulled out that I liked that says, you could either perpetuate your age-exclusive behavior or you can call it out and say, we are going past this type of thinking. Companies that do that will have a competitive edge. So that's the quote. What I like about that is I think the advice is sound in a sense that if we can coach and train our people to work together, to not use these kinds of terms and biases and stereotypes, that, whether it's training or team building or whatever, but to ingrain this in the culture, then I think people would want to work there.
Yeah.
Right?
I think you need to capitalize on that, right? Do you have a mentor program? Like, what are you doing with your generation that maybe feels a little bit lost with the newer generation and how to act, like how to work with them? I think that's probably really challenging on both ends. But I think that the boomer generation has a really hard time with the millennial generation. I think that's the strongest rub, and I can't identify what it is. But I think if you are smart and you're a company that says, okay, this needs to be part of our culture, and we have boomers who have been here for years and years and have all this years of expertise and have worked here forever, let's help them pass that on to the younger generation. Yeah,
and the whole point about like the competitive advantage point that it was in that last quote I read was the fact that you get people to work together, things are much more beautiful. They're harmonious, people work together in teamwork. But I believe that when you perpetuate these types of terms and these stereotypes, you start to divide people more. It's no different than saying like, all Republicans are evil or Democrats or socialists or something. Yeah. That's crazy, right? Yeah. Because then it's like, okay,
stereotyping.
Well, then I don't want to work with that group or whatever.
I don't identify with that, so I have nothing to learn or nothing to glean from them.
Yeah.
And that's not really true.
Not true at all. We're all human beings. We all have some value and skills and all that. So the point that I want to keep hitting home and why I wanted you on again was to talk about these terms they're maybe funny on the surface, but in the workplace, they serve no purpose at all.
They do not. Yeah. So if you use them, please heed our advice. Please don't say them. I think if you're, talking to your friends or your kids, you're going to hear them. And, it's also your job to educate people, because what I have found is that saying nothing also, people interpret that to mean that you're okay with it.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of speak up when you hear something that that didn't really hit me right. Let me go ahead and correct you, or let me educate you, whatever it is that you feel comfortable with based on your audience.
So the workforce is aging. We have people over the age of 55 in 2016. Let's see, what does it say? From 35.7 million in 2016 to 42.1 million in 2026. So it gives you a sense that the population is aging. However, there's going to be younger people coming into the workforce as well. So more important is for these generations to work together. And I think employers have an opportunity to do more cross collaboration, reverse mentorship, all these other things. What do you think?
I think this is the time when I think they say there is the most amount of generations in the workplace, because people, as you said, are aging and not retiring for, various reasons, healthcare or whatever. And then the newest generation is also coming in. So you have up to 4 or 5 generations working in a workplace, and that can be really challenging. So if you're not doing the work on the back end to say, how do we integrate these people? How do we get these people talking? Let's get them in a room together. I think then you're missing out.
Yeah. It's funny because me, as part of the millennial generation, I'm like on the cusp. I grew up with technology. I like it a lot. I can find myself like wanting to sit behind a computer or behind my phone or
figure
whatever.
out how things work, and you're okay with it because you're intrigued by it.
I'm okay
my
with
parents' generation, not at all. Like they do something because I inform them that they need to. And I think, but it's not their like.
Those are the biggest parts of these generations where they're going to make the most impact is, I think, the digitally native younger generations will want to use technology to communicate,
do their work
or not
easier.
Communicate at all. I mean, like not in person or be socially awkward. Versus your parents' generation, my parents' generation, they'd probably rather pick up the phone, or they'd rather.
Every
have
time
a
my parents call
person.
me, I'm like, "Why are you calling me?"
Stop calling
this
me.
Could have been a text message. And I love them, but it's like, my dad doesn't text hardly at all. If he does, he uses Siri to talk. Right? My mom is really good at texting, but. I got her an Apple Watch because they were taking a trip. And I was like, if you lose your phone, I want to know that I can still get a hold of you and you can still figure out a way back to wherever you're going, right? But then it was 2 hours of explaining how to do this. And then still she's like, oh, I didn't know I could do this. And so it's like, I'm trying to be patient. Yeah. Like, okay, this is new to them. They didn't grow up with technology. Yeah. You know, I didn't even get a cell phone until 8th grade, I think. And it was one of those like Nokia bricks that were like indestructible, right?
You play Snake on it?
I loved that phone so much. And like all my Blackberries, I loved mine. But not to dig on Apple, but you know. And then the new generation has had nothing but technology put in their hands since they were born.
Yeah.
So it's interesting the amount of, you know, the ways technology just creeps into all of the generations.
And all these are all tools at the end of the day, communication tools. So I'd say the opportunity lies in like, how do you meet them halfway and get people still collaborating? So like, here's an example. So we have technology, millennials might, and even Gen Z might lean heavily towards that. Whereas boomers, Xers, they might not be as digitally savvy. So if they'd rather have an in-person meeting or communicate with voice, use some of these voice and video tools to communicate, like send a video message or send a voice memo.
Yeah.
I think
be creative.
Yeah. But the bottom line is we need to keep communicating and we need to stop using these stupid labels too.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a point too where we say, okay, this does need to be a meeting. Okay, this does need to happen in person. Yeah. And I think, you know, some of the younger generations need to be okay with that. And not everything can be done remotely at home. Yeah. And be flexible.
Yep. So. Okay, so bottom line from this podcast, what you should know: stop using these terms.
Do not say "okay, boomer." Do not say "lazy millennial."
You can say it to your parents, I guess, right?
I'm not going to tell you not to, but do I need to be more mindful of it? Yes.
Yes, you be mindful, and that goes for any stereotypes. Yeah. And then the other thing is, let's keep communicating with.
Keep talking.
Yeah, let's
be curious,
more collaborative, and teamwork. It's all about teamwork.
Great
right?
things will come. You just have to be patient.
It's true. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Paige.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always good to have you.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
See you.